Our seasons determine the cycle of life, and each one poses new challenges to nature. After the hardships of winter, life explodes in spring. And the heat of summer is followed by the harvest of autumn. The constant changes demand peak performance from animals and plants. Danger lurks everywhere, and time is often very short. But however different the seasons are, each has its own special magic. The journey through a year begins in a winter wonderland. High up in the moist atmosphere of towering clouds, tiny drops of water and motes of dust transform themselves into glistening crystals. These combine to form soft flakes, becoming heavier as they make their way towards the ground. Diamond dust, it's called, when the sunlight catches the flakes and makes them sparkle. Once on the ground, they form a sea of the finest crystalline shapes. Matchless jewels. Six-pointed works of art, each one unique and different from all the others. But the white splendor has its downside too, especially when the white snow blanket turns into a shimmering, hard sheet of ice. For the fox, these are not the most ideal conditions for hunting mice. The snow is now so hard that his soft paws don't even leave tracks. He can hear the mice beneath the snow, but it's hard for him to penetrate the ice. This hunt ends with a rather bruised nose. Snowy winters are especially demanding for Flora and Fauna. Trees seem to groan under the weight of their white finery, and animals can hardly find any food. But for one animal, snow is apparently no hindrance at all. Wild boars have very powerful snouts. As long as the ground beneath the snow isn't frozen, they have no problems getting at their food. They are omnivores, constantly on the lookout for prime spots to dig for food. The forest floor provides them with plenty of roots, bulbs, worms, and occasionally even a mouse. Their menu is varied from time to time by the addition of a bit of greenery. But foraging is tiring work. Really tiring. Elsewhere, things are a bit more lively. A pine cone like this is a real windfall. Squirrels literally take the cones apart. It's a painstaking business, all that effort for such small seeds. The nuthatch doesn't seem to know quite what to do with the pine cone. It has to get at the seeds somehow. The woodpecker has mastered the technique. It wedges the cone in a branch crevice. So that's how it works. There's no time for more than a quick look because the woodpecker itself is hungry. Now the seeds just have to get hammered out. The next chance for the nuthatch. When food is scarce, even a pine cone can become a bone of contention. For the animal world, winter is by far the most difficult time of year. Yet many of them are surprisingly well adapted to cold and ice. No matter how cold it gets, the white-throated dipper heads for the water in any weather. In the icy water, it forages for protein-rich insect larvae. It's the only European songbird that can swim and dive. Its dense, oiled plumage protects it from the icy water like a wetsuit. In addition to that, it can close its nostrils and ears, and its sharp eyesight allows it to see underwater and above as clearly as though it were wearing goggles. A great advantage when foraging for food in an icy stream. But how and where is a fox meant to find prey in the endless blanket of white? He needs 20 mice a day for his hunger to be sated. But where are they? The mouse has no idea that every rustle is being closely monitored from the snow's surface. Or does it? Will the hunter succeed this time? It's the cycle of nature. The death of the mouse helps ensure the survival of the fox. The eagle owl only starts to forage at night. Deer rest often in winter. They can lower their body temperature, slowing their metabolism to a minimum, saving valuable energy. A special camera reveals how the animals only lose body heat in a few places, mainly from their heads. The rest is protected by their dense fur. The owl's plumage also provides perfect insulation. Certainly better than the mouse's coat. Apart from eyes and beak, no body heat escapes at all. The rest of the surface is the same temperature as the air. Mice are only safe from owls when they're in their burrows. Despite bone-chilling cold, many waterfowl stay in the north during winter. Most coots choose not to fly south to warmer climes. As long as there are ice-free lakes, they can find enough food to be able to stay in their breeding grounds through the winter. They use expert diving techniques to hunt for small aquatic creatures, algae and water plants. Coming back up happens automatically. They're very light and just pop up to the surface. The coot's well-oiled plumage protects them against the cold and wet, a very helpful attribute when foraging underwater. When the air is very cold, the damp fog settles on plants as delicate ice crystals. For the last time, the winter wonder world presents itself in all its glory. The increasing strength of the sun brings the cold season to an end. The thaw sets in, and nature awakens from its winter sleep. Hidden beneath the snow, the heralds of spring are already waiting in the wings. Winter aconite, snowdrops, crocuses, and wood anemones. They've stored energy last year in their roots and bulbs. Now, in early March, they strive with all their strength to push up through the ground. Their early blooms are very important for the bees. Because this is when they most need protein-rich pollen to feed their new brood. To ensure the survival of their bee colony, they toil away tirelessly, from dawn till dusk. Longer days and rising temperatures also attract migrating birds back from their wintering grounds. Storks and starlings are the first to return to Central Europe from their sojourn to the south. It's hotter and drier in their wintering grounds, and there's much more competition for food resources. Here, they're lured by plentiful food and nesting sites. For most of them, it's definitely worth the long journey. Gathering energy, growing and ensuring the propagation of species, those are the great challenges of spring. During the breeding season, these large flocks will spread out across the country, and each bird will found its own family. Hares are early starters. By the time March arrives, the battle to create the next generation is already well underway. In general, hares live alone. It's only during the mating season that rival bucks and willing does seek each other's company. When a violent slugfest breaks loose, it is generally all in the name of winning the favor of a female. After all, the winner has the best chance of becoming a father. In meadows, fields and forests, propagation is topic number 1. The light and warmth cause the hazelnut's sap to rise too. The male blossoms show off their massive amounts of pollen, while the female blossoms develop quite differently. They don't have to rely on bees and other insects for pollination. It's the wind that takes on the task of transferring the pollen. Just a gentle breeze is enough to release clouds of pollen and carry it to the female blossoms, following which the development of the next hazelnut harvest is well on the way. Streams and rivers are still icy cold, but it is here that the dipper sets up its nursery. The parent birds are collecting padding for their nest. Their mating season was back in winter. Now they're starting their first brood. Only where the water runs clean and clear is where they make their home. A pair of dippers takes some 2 weeks to construct their nest, and to finish it off, a nice leaf. Thoroughly cleaned, it serves as the final touch to the nest, as well as a soft bed for the eggs. Once the nest is finished, the male's work is done. Among the dippers, it's the female that broods the eggs. In the branches of a tree still bare of foliage, a squirrel makes itself at home. Squirrels build their nests high up in the trees, either using twigs and moss or inside a hollow in a tree trunk. The mating season for squirrels begins in January. By March at the latest, most females are pregnant and preparing for the imminent birth of their young. They need plenty of rest, even though their big bellies make it difficult to find a comfortable position. There is still no greenery in the forest. Most of the trees will remain leafless until at least the end of March. And that's exactly what causes the growth spurt on the ground below. Beech seedlings grow fast to ensure their place in the sun. Hundreds of little saplings strive upwards before the leaves of their parent tree cast them into the shade. In the upper stories of the forest, all the birds are looking for partners. The robin is one of the first and loudest. His repertoire consists of over 250 different songs. Bird songs are intended mainly to impress potential partners. Here, it's not about size and strength, but vocal supremacy. On the ground, things are getting noisy too. The grass frog's reproduction cycle starts in shallow water. Each female lays up to 4,000 tiny eggs. These swell up in the water, forming a gelatinous, transparent protein casing. This protects the black tadpole embryos inside. But not from common moorhens. Frog spawn is a favourite tidbit for them. Also known as swamp chickens, they will eat anything, from whichever source of food is most convenient. Whether it be spawn or frogs. Wherever coots are found in a pond, it turns into a fight arena when it comes to choosing the best brooding site. Once the question of brooding sites has been sorted out, the coots can now also concentrate on actually propagating their species. Sometimes it takes a little while for couples to sort out their differences. But where it comes to nest building, it's all about teamwork. Strong twigs form the foundation. For days, both partners toil away at creating a solid base for the floating nest. At breeding time, things get a little quieter around the pond. Starlings on the lookout for a bride. A male uses leaves as a bragging factor. This is to show off his superior nest-building abilities. This tit looks like he would quite like to move into a pre-constructed nest. But the house owner doesn't see things the same way. While she's watching from down below, he sings the praises of his new home. Until she finally hears him. With the cherry blossom's appearance in April, spring finally unfolds in all its glory. The cherry is one of the first fruit-bearing trees to blossom. This could be earlier or later, depending on the weather. For bees, now is their busiest time. The female worker bees tirelessly carry food to the hive. They feed the other workers in the hive and fill up the honeycombs. This well-known waggling dance is used by the returning bees to pass on to the others where they will find what kind of food. The marked queen now lays egg after egg in the prepared honeycomb cells. During the high season in spring, that's up to 2,000 eggs a day. Nurse bees take care of the brood for 9 days, feeding the larvae. Then they're covered and pupate. 12 days later, the fully formed bee frees itself from its wax cell and gets its first sweet energy boost. Honey is the hive's driving force. And there's plenty of raw material for it now. After a long winter, if the weather warms up quickly, many types of fruit trees can begin blossoming at once. There's an overabundance of nectar and pollen, so the bees have to gather supplies constantly. High season in spring is a very strenuous time for bees. But they're not the only ones busying themselves among the fruit trees. For young foxes, the orchard is one big playground. Springtime is above all a time for young animals. High up in the tree, the squirrel returns more frequently to its nest. There's a big event in the offing. The contractions begin. The birth is in full progress. No sooner has the first baby been licked clean than the next one is on the way. Baby squirrels arrive tail first into the world. It takes around 2 hours to give birth to 4 babies. Thumb-sized, naked, blind, and deaf, utterly vulnerable. They instinctively root for their mother's teats. Suckling milk will be their main activity for the next 6 weeks. Beech leaves only unfold towards the end of April. The leaf canopy is getting denser. Soon, only a few rays of sunshine will penetrate down to the forest floor, slowing the growth of the tree saplings below. The leaves in the treetops now take up most of the sunlight. Streams and rivers can overflow in spring. Nests built too close to the edge of the riverbank are often washed away. The dippers had to build a new nest. This time it's hidden and inaccessible behind a waterfall. Like all bird parents, they must constantly carry food back to the nest for their brood. The new nest may be more secure, but the aerial approach now requires highly acrobatic skills. Their staple diet is the caddisfly. In their larvae stage, they live in the water. The dipper has worked out how to extract the nutritious morsel out of its stony sheath. A decent-sized snack for its offspring. By early May, all the trees are in full sap. Wild boar mothers need plenty of food now, as they have a rough-and-tumble horde of young to feed. By May, their offspring have mostly grown bigger. These are probably latecomers. Springtime high spirits are apparently not an age-related issue. For the little ones, it's time to take a nap and tank up their energy again. If danger threatens or the sow starts in fright, the little ones react with flight behavior that has rarely been observed. They freeze, motionlessly feigning death, until the mother gives the all clear. Squirrels are very well adapted to foraging in trees. Their rear paws can turn outwards so that they can hold themselves securely while hanging upside down. It takes the seeds of around 100 spruce cones to fulfill their daily requirement. So they have to eat very fast. They deftly rip open the shell to get at the tiny, nutritious seeds. The squirrel mother needs plenty of food right now. There's a whole nest full of babies waiting for her milk. Around the lakes and ponds, things are getting a little hectic again. Little ducklings, coot chicks, all of them are clamoring to have their bellies filled. The only solution is teamwork, as these coot parents know, whether on the water or in the nest. This strenuous parental time takes between 4 to 6 weeks. The chicks can already swim shortly after they hatch. They return to their nest for a rest. In the moorhen family, only one chick has survived. It also gets fed by both parents. And it actually seems to be full at last. Meanwhile, the tadpoles have hatched. When the weather's warm, this happens within a few days. In cooler years, it can take up to 4 weeks. Their development also depends very much on the spring weather. After a few weeks, the first rudimentary limbs appear, starting with the back legs. Swellings indicate where the front legs will be. Their gills have receded, and the only reminder of its tadpole existence is the rudder-like tail. The metamorphosis is nearly over. Some 2.5 months after spawning, the transformation is complete. The grass frog leaves the water behind it and begins its second life as a princely frog. The first roe deer kids are born mid-May. Their mother seeks shelter in the long grass. A fox could pose a danger to the little one. The mother doe sounds a warning. The fox pays her no attention. He should do, though, as the roe deer is not entirely defenseless. And an enraged mother can certainly turn the tables. Once the positions are clarified, they continue on their way. The fox pups have developed well during the last weeks. Mother and father take it in turns to bring them food. At the start of summer, the fox pups are big enough for their first outings. They have to explore their surroundings and learn where and how to find food. Storks returned here back in early spring. Now, during the warm season, they're busy raising their young. They actually seek out living space close to human beings. Perched on rooftops, they're safe from most of their enemies. And it's much easier for them to find food in freshly mown meadows than in high wild grass. The meadows grow back quickly, blooming and maturing in a very short time. But insects also spread rapidly, especially aphids. Winged and wingless. Also known as plant lice, an aphid can bear several nymphs a day. Plant juice is what they live off. However, aphids only need part of the nutrients, and once digested, there is plenty of sugar and water left over. And this sweet syrup, called honeydew, attracts the ants. They gather the aphid's secretions to feed the young in their own nest. In return, they protect the aphids from predators. Ducks only spend time in the meadow to forage. The ducklings are precocial, leaving their nests immediately upon hatching to look for their own food. Catching flies mid-air is apparently an inborn talent for ducks. Once they've eaten enough plant and insect food in the meadow, the mother duck leads them to the lake. This is where these waterfowl are in their real element. Even though they still only have downy feathers, the little ones are already experts at swimming and diving. They eat plants, larvae, worms, and all kinds of water creatures. The lake offers them an abundant choice. In June, the days are filled with 15 hours of energy-laden sunshine. The plants take full advantage of it and grow for all they're worth. The mother squirrel is under nursery stress. She has to carry the responsibility for the little rascals all alone. 5 weeks after birth, the youngsters can hardly be kept under control any longer. And the nursery is getting crowded. The little ones insist on going outside. They're ready for life in the treetops. All the activity makes them hungry and tired. Every couple of hours, the young squirrels need food. At last, with full bellies, they can all rest for a while. On the ground, sweet wild strawberries are ripening. The plants like the semi-shady spots under the trees and bear their juicy fruits all summer long. This berry is actually a nut, or more accurately, an aggregate fruit. The little nuts on the outside are hard and are excreted by the animals that eat them, spreading them right across the forest. Ants like sweet things too. Not only aphid honeydew, but also the flesh of the wild strawberry. So they also help to distribute its seeds. But red ants are hardly peace-loving vegetarians. To rear their larvae, they also need proteins. That means caterpillars, beetles, and other insects have to watch out. This dung beetle hasn't a chance against the army of ants. Their onslaught with powerful jaws and acid sprays simply overwhelms it. Soon, it will be just another food source for the brood of this multi-million-sized ant colony. Summer is high season in the ant nest. A single colony collects some 30 kilograms of insects and 200 liters of honeydew from the surrounding area every year. This is their peak harvest time as the ant colony rests in winter. Lakes and ponds offer a habitat for all kinds of insects and microorganisms. Dragonflies, for example, need calm waters to breed. Here they produce one generation after another. These azure damselflies have just hatched and now have around 4 weeks in which to mate. The process begins by the male grabbing the female by the neck. She then bends her abdomen downwards and forwards and picks up the sperm packet at the front of the male's abdomen. Both of them have to stay on the lookout, as not every damselfly has found its own partner. And the so-called love wheel often has would-be intruders trying to break it up. Other males also want to pass on their genes, but a mating couple already locked together is not that easy to pry apart. The victorious male holds on to his female partner until she has deposited her eggs, ensuring that no one else can interfere. An aquatic plant just below the lake's surface is the perfect place for damselflies to lay their eggs. At the end of its abdomen, the female has an ovipositor, a spiky shaft with which she stabs the plant stems and pushes the eggs into them. In just a few weeks, larvae will hatch from these eggs, and next year they will metamorphose into damselflies. In the traditional orchards, blossoming is over for the fruit trees. Now it's time for the fruit. Cherries are among the earliest additions to the menu for many fruit lovers. Among them, and especially keen, are the starlings. feeding their insatiable offspring is easier directly at the food source. A flock of starlings with their young can decimate an entire cherry harvest in no time at all. But armed with only a beak, it isn't easy to divide a cherry into bite-sized pieces. And they can't be swallowed all in one go. Amid all the bounty, things can go wrong. But in nature, nothing goes to waste. A cherry like this will always find grateful takers on the ground below. Mice love the sweet, juicy fruit. This starling has evidently had enough of its parental duties. It's time for the chick to fend for itself. Most animals make full use of the long summer days. But the dormouse has a different rhythm. While it's light, it would rather stay in its nest. There, it will sleep all day long. Usually it hibernates for 8 months, from October till May. It's only active for 4 months of the year. The nights are short in summer. For nocturnal animals like the dormouse, there's not much time for foraging. It spends these brief hours hunting among the branches for insects, fruits, and nuts. When the sun rises again, it's the turn of diurnal creatures, especially those dependent on flowers. Not all field dwellers are interested in nectar and pollen. A crab spider uses a daisy flower as its hunting ground. It's very well camouflaged, being able to adapt the color of its body to the environment. It waits, motionless, for its victim. But doesn't always succeed. Now all it can do is wait some more. Failed attempts are part of its daily routine, so the crab spider retreats for now. The end of June is the high point of summer. An unmistakable sign of this is the field poppy. It's one of the most proliferous producers of pollen and a magnet for insects of all kinds. Next to bees, hoverflies are the most important pollinators. Since the Stone Age, the poppy has been a typical companion plant to grains. Today, however, the poppy is considered a weed in grain fields, as are many other wildflowers that grow on farmland. The summer heat gets more and more intense. The hotter it gets, the more important the water resources become. All animals are thirsty now, even the sparrows. They know exactly where to find water, and when it gets very hot, they will often fly long distances for a cool drink. Insects also have a greater need for water when temperatures soar. Wasps not only come because they're thirsty, they also use water to cool their nests. And they suck up as much water as their abdomen will hold. Sparrows are also interested in more than just drinking the water. It helps them to cool down. And they can clean their feathers while splashing about too. Sparrows are sociable birds, preferring to nest in groups. A stork's nest is an ideal location. Here they're well protected and their nests are in the shade. For young storks, however, the heat can be dangerous. Their nests are exposed to the merciless glare of the sun. The parent birds must provide shade, or else their young could die. But shade alone isn't enough. The young storks are also thirsty. In the hot weather, the parent birds carry water back to the nest in their crops. So even helpless stork chicks can withstand a heat wave. All through the summer, mosquitoes and gnats breed in shallow or stagnant water. The larvae generally hang by their respiratory tubes from the water's surface and filter plant particles from the water with their mouthparts. After a few weeks, they change their habitat and leave their subaquatic world. It takes around half an hour for the insect's body to free itself from the pupa. In point of fact, the mosquito is a miracle of nature. It's just a pity that they hatch in their millions and become a plague. But they're not the only ones. There's a myriad biting, stinging, and blood-sucking insects swarming about in the air. But when the clouds gather in the skies and the wind picks up, the mosquito plague is over. A typical summer thunderstorm is brewing. Charged up and electrified by the heat, the air discharges in pure energy. For nature, parched and thirsting, the rain is a blessing. As it is for the storks, tormented by the heat, the wet meadows are now teeming with worms and snails. The storm is over as quickly as it began. In the forest, the trees gratefully absorb the rain, as they also suffer in the heat. Trees lose water by evaporation through their leaves. On a hot summer's day, a single tree can lose up to 300 litres. Extreme, persistent heat can even cause them to start shedding their leaves. But for now, they can continue to provide shade with their dense leaf canopy. Since the first fresh greenery appeared, the deer have been eating their fill. They've long since made up for their weight loss during winter and are now building up their reserves. They'll need them too, because their mating season, or rut, already starts in July. But first, he has to discover whether or not she's ready yet. Evidently, her scent is attracting him, so he stays close to her. This so-called herding behavior can take hours or even days and uses up a lot of energy. The grain ripens quickly in the summer heat. Across Central Europe, fields turn into rippling seas of ripened gold. If the weather conditions are not too dry, there's a good chance of a rich harvest. The end of summer is harvest time everywhere. Also in the animal kingdom. The ripe ears of wheat have a magical attraction for songbirds. Flocks of sparrows arrive. For them, the nutritious grains are a concentrated food source. Soon, the glut will disappear. Sunflowers bloom towards the end of the warm season. Their Their large flower heads are now one of the most important food sources for insects like bees, bumblebees, and butterflies. In the fruit orchards, ripe apples reach their harvest peak. Whatever's left behind by humans generally ends up on the ground. Hedgehogs are more interested in insects, snails, and earthworms. The windfall apples don't interest him. Hedgehogs can't digest plant matter. Unlike the mouse, it gorges on as much fresh fruit as possible. It will spend most of the winter months below ground, where the only food will be stores of grain and dry plant roots. The lavish abundance also attracts insects such as wasps, flies, and even hornets. The fermenting fruit serves as a kind of filling station. The carbohydrates are the fuel that gives them strength. The intensely sweet aroma attracts them in droves. Butterflies like this admiral take maximum advantage of this concentrated source of energy. They need reserves for their forthcoming journey to their winter quarters in the south. Not all admirals will take on this long flight. Some also seek out a place in Central Europe to spend the winter. It's a risky decision. They can only survive here if the winter is mild. Harvest time in the mixed forests begins in late September. The beech trees are heavy with large quantities of nutritious, ripe nuts. In some years, the trees carry an excessive number of beech nuts. The forest turns into a nutritional paradise for its animal inhabitants, perfect conditions for them to get ready for winter. When ripe, the prickly outer pod opens up within a few days to reveal its treasure. The little beech nuts consist of around 40% fat, high-calorie nourishment, especially for rodents and birds. The long-awaited forest fruit buffet is open, and the great feast can begin. The squirrel prefers its beech nuts fresh from the tree. It extracts the nut deftly from its shell. The yellow-necked field mouse is in a hurry. Its pantry has to be well stocked for the coming winter. With such an abundant supply of food, the bigger animals are soon drawn to it too. Even deer fortify themselves with the tree's rich bounty. Red deer usually live in herds with strict gender separation. Females and young deer have no antlers. They form and live in doe herds, led by an experienced matriarchal female, the alpha doe. Now in September, they are joined by the stags. But only the strongest, the dominant male, stays with the does and may mate with them. Despite the rutting season, the animals must still feed themselves up to create fat reserves for winter. A doe eats around 20 kilograms of food a day, which it ruminates. She regurgitates the coarsely chewed food from her rumen, chews and swallows it again. Several times. Only finely processed food pulp reaches the stomach where it's then digested. The doe needs her strength as she's still suckling her young, all being well until the following year. As long as she's well nourished, her fawn has a good chance of survival in its first winter. The wetlands and lakes now also offer a wide variety of food. It's hardly surprising that countless waterfowl settle here. Large or small, young and old, vegetarian or fish-eating, there's something for everyone here. It's an ideal place to rear chicks and teach them how to forage for themselves. Like this young great-crested grebe. An abundance of freshwater fish makes it easy for waterfowl to thrive here. The young great-crested grebe has already learned how to catch fish. And also knows that it has to swallow them head first, or else the spiny fins get stuck. And the size has to be right too, or the fish won't fit down its throat. In Central Europe, great-crested grebes and coots are known as resident birds, as they can find enough food here even in the cold season. Lapwings, on the other hand, are short-distance migrants, stopping over in autumn on their way to the Mediterranean. Only in very mild winters will these climate-sensitive birds stay on here. They prefer wet landscapes, such as water's edges or bogs, places where there are plenty of insects, their staple diet. Only at the onset of frost will the flock begin their journey south. Grey geese are actually also migratory birds, but since winters have been getting milder, many of them spend it in Central Europe. In the forests, the earth now also reveals its fruits. Mushrooms spring up seemingly from nowhere in just a few days. The visible mushroom caps are only a small part of the whole organism. The main part, the thread-like mycelium mass, proliferates invisibly underground. The damp forest floor is ideal for mushrooms, as well as slugs. For most slugs, this is their last meal. Unlike other types of snails, they die in autumn, but not before laying their eggs, ensuring that the next generation can soon hatch. Hibernators, such as this hedgehog, really have to get a move on now. Before it hides away in its nest at the end of November, it also needs sufficient fat reserves to ensure survival during the long winter. And protein-rich slugs come in handy. There are only another couple of weeks left for the hedgehog to hunt the smaller forest creatures. In October, the chill breath of winter can already be felt. At night, temperatures now often drop below zero, as the ground frost clearly testifies in the morning. In this colder weather, the mouse now seldom leaves its padded underground nest. But when breakfast is right on the doorstep, it's worth venturing out to replenish one's energy reserves. While foraging for food tops the list for most of the forest animals in autumn, the dominant stag has other priorities. He repeatedly checks whether a female is ready to mate. His characteristic bellowing ensures that he maintains his dominant status quo while demonstrating his strength at the same time. His fur has already undergone its winter change. The hairs are grey and twice as long as in the summer. The does and fawns are not quite there yet. They are still sporting their red, shorter summer coat, but this can change within a week. Eating is at least as important for them as mating, especially with tempting, nutritious chestnuts hanging low on the trees. At an impressive 75 decibels, as loud as a car engine, the stag's bellowing echoes throughout the forest. His tireless campaigning and skirmishing lasts for up to 6 weeks, a double burden that only the strongest can endure. It's not only the dominant stag that accomplishes extraordinary feats in autumn. Trees now withdraw precious chlorophyll from their leaves. Broken down into its biological components, the chlorophyll is stored in branches, trunks, and roots until spring. With the green gone, other colors appear in the leaves. Falling temperatures and shorter days are the trigger for this showy display of nature. But energy is still produced by photosynthesis in the colorful leaves, although in smaller quantities. Anthocyanins, the red pigments, are actually only produced in autumn and have an important role to play. They protect the leaves from the autumn sunshine, while ensuring that light can still be converted into energy. Depending on the type of tree and its location, the color spectrum of its leaves can vary enormously. From an Indian summer in North America, the momiji in Japan, or a golden autumn in Germany, all over the world, this is considered one of the most beautiful times of the year. In the forests, meanwhile, the squirrel is still stockpiling feverishly. Although there's enough food for everyone, as a loner, it will not tolerate competition and energetically defends its territory. Once the intruder is chased away, the squirrel can finally return to its main concern. It buries its treasures in seeming safety. Dig the hole, put in the food, cover it up. The caching procedure is always the same. But its activities are being keenly observed. The jay also buries its winter reserves in the ground. Perhaps that's why it's so interested. The squirrel works tirelessly to secure its winter stocks. But this hiding place is not safe at all. The jay has been watching and steals the treasure. An easy job for the thief, it appears. But will that trick work again? The unsuspecting squirrel carries on storing. And his hiding place is raided once again. Has the industrious collector really not noticed anything? The beneficiary could carry on like this all day. But squirrels are smart. This time, it takes the acorn it's just buried back out of the hole. Unnoticed by the jay, who, applying his usual method, intends to rob the supposed food store. But not this time. The cache is empty. And while the squirrel quietly gets on with burying its supplies, the jay is still digging away fruitlessly for the loot. The winner of this cat and mouse game this time is definitely the squirrel. And the thief ends up empty-handed. The damp, cold autumn weather frequently brings with it morning fog. It can often linger for a long while, especially in the valleys. In thermal inversion conditions, huge seas of cloud can accumulate against the multicolored autumn backdrop. But the colorful splendor doesn't last long. More and more trees begin to shed their leaves. A protective mechanism to help them get through the winter unscathed. Trees lose a great deal of water through their leaves. And in winter that would be fatal, because that is when most precipitation freezes or stays on the ground as snow. If they still had leaves, many trees would simply dry up and die in the colder season. And shedding their leaves has other benefits. Through their foliage, trees also rid themselves of environmental toxins that they have absorbed during the year. And in winter, the leaves on the ground protect the tree's roots from the cold. In mid-November, the banks of the forest stream are thickly strewn with colourful leaves. On the ground and in the water, the fallen leaves start to decompose. The dipper has an easy time of it now. It doesn't even have to dive. It simply picks the insects off the leaves and grasses. Freshwater shrimp are a particularly welcome snack. They live off the leaves that the trees are now discarding in large numbers. The piles of leaves provide an ideal habitat for the little crustacea, hideaway and food source in one. The dipper isn't fussy. It will even eat poisonous centipedes. It merely wipes off the poison they secrete on its feathers. After that, it's quite safe to eat. But these idyllic conditions for the dipper don't last long. Once the autumn leaves have rotted and sunk, it has to dive back into the icy water. A herd of wild boar patrol their territory. They've already grown their bristly, dark winter coats, and they're well nourished. Even now, in early December, they find enough food under the leaves. Forests are their preferred habitat, especially those with a damp forest floor. The mud contains an additional source of food for them, including insects, worms and slugs. These young animals are around 6 months old. They're facing the first winter of their lives. But the prospect doesn't seem to make them any less playful. It's mid-December. The first snowflakes herald the approach of winter. The snow gradually covers up the greenery, cloaking field and forest. Animals will now need to brave the cold and scarcity of food. That also goes for the deer. In winter, their coat is shaggy with a thick layer of woolly hairs underneath the long, stiff outer bristles. This insulation is so efficient that even the snow falling on their backs stays there without melting. So they can ruminate in peace. And after the first heavy snowfall, it reappears in all its glory. The winter wonderland. Even the otherwise rather rough and ready wild boars seem to fall under the romantic spell. A group of sows and their young is called a sounder. The males, called tuskers, live alone and are only allowed to join a sounder during the mating season. The social cohesion of the group is very strong, and the females enjoy tender physical contact. And there are always some who are especially fond of each other. Persistent frost has frozen ponds and lakes. Like most birds, coots have cold feet. This is due to a so-called wonder net, a special circulatory system that keeps the body warm and the feet cold. This prevents the ice from melting underfoot and trapping them when it freezes again. Added insulation is provided by their plumage, which they wrap around their feet. This does make standing up a bit difficult, though. Their webbed feet are not ideal for walking on frozen water, however. But that's what they have to do every now and then. It's another precaution against getting stuck to the ice. Taking off from a frozen runway can be pretty difficult too. Snow and ice enchant the landscape. These days, it's a rare sight before year's end. Climate change is causing winters in Central Europe to be much milder. Though many dream of a white Christmas, this wish largely goes unfulfilled. The longest night of the year approaches. At the winter solstice in Germany, it's dark for around 16 hours. On this night, the Christmas lights seem to shine even more brightly. For many, this is the start of the festivities that go with seeing out the year, a time marked by tradition and quiet reflection. But the circle of life has no time to pause for reflection. From now on, the days will start to get longer, offering new opportunities. Most animals and plants will survive this period of privation. And spring is sure to be back again soon. Our seasons are full of contrasts and extremes, and each has its own magic.